Hi, everybody. Welcome to Cloud and Clear. I'm Miles Ward. I'm CTO at SADA. This is our podcast for bringing business and digital leaders, innovators in the cloud technology space together to think through what's next. How do we help everybody take advantage of the superpower that is Google Cloud and the broader innovation in this digital native ecosystem? I'm just really excited for this one. This is going to be a lot of fun. I want to introduce you to a colleague, employee, co-worker, collaborator, partner, innovator, buddy of mine, Dan Isla. Dan, say howdy to everybody.
Hello, I'm Dan Isla, VP of Product at Itopia.
Itopia. Tell me more.
Itopia. Itopia is a startup based out of Miami, Google Cloud exclusive partner, and we build solutions built on GCP to help people be more productive using cloud infrastructure, specifically with automating Windows deployments. And I joined Itopia almost a year ago, coming from Google.
Yeah.
Your team, the solution architects.
Hey, wait a minute. I was at Google too. How does that work? So look, we've been at this a long time. This cloud computing thing's an awful lot of fun. Dan and I have been trying to punch our way into customers big and small, help them take advantage of all the platform tools that are there. And I think it was, fairly early on in the, your journey and us working together kind of post your years at NASA, where VDI and sort of helping customers get access to a tool system that was consistent seemed like a repeating problem. Happened at big companies, small companies, all over the place. Is that what the focus is right now? Is that where you're headed?
Yeah, the coming from cloud in the very early days, working at the Jet Propulsion Lab, I spent almost 8 years there. And having access to cloud resources was pretty difficult, and so we're trying to leverage this compute power that you have outside of your local data centers, and trying to make it accessible and useful to people. Not only was it a natural transition to Google, but to Google Cloud in general. We're trying to build products that make it easier to consume cloud, to be more productive in a work from home environment. It's been pretty popular lately, to say the least.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, and you said magic words there, like, trying to make it so that cloud is easier to consume. I've never heard anybody put easy and Kubernetes into the same sentence before. And yet there we are. Like, how does Kubernetes tie into what you're doing at Itopia?
Yeah, so at Itopia, I started a project actually at Google as a solution architect called Selkies. And Selkies is a open source platform for orchestrating workloads on Kubernetes. So Kubernetes is typically a platform for running microservices in a distributed fashion, make it reliable and easy to operate. Kubernetes itself is not easy to operate, but that's why Google has GKE, the Google Kubernetes engine, take away that pain. But it's still a large, complex project that you need to wrap into larger abstractions. And so Selkies does that in a way that makes it possible to run stateful workloads for users in Kubernetes. In particular, we're delivering the entire developer environment through containers. So Selkies orchestrates that and makes it possible to make sure the storage follows the user, sets up the entire IDE, delivers it to a browser in a secure way, and connects with all the services using Google's networking services like VPC peering, Cloud VPN, to make it accessible to your on-prem or private resources.
Mm-hmm. I mean, I watch a lot where companies that are coming from either Office or going further back, Lotus Notes, or having to pull together the tool system for a class of their workers, right? For Office kind of products, that's knowledge workers. But I think it's never been more complex to assemble the tool system for developer workers. That class of folks needs a zillion tools. They all have to work together in a way that's coherent. And, at every step in that, you're trying to figure out, okay, what complexity can I walk away from? Like, okay, we're going to do all of this on our laptop. No place but that laptop. This is the only laptop where everything is. You don't change anything about that. With Spaces, you store all of that configuration, consistency of experience, make it programmatic, deployable, easy to get to compliance and consistency, but do all of that in the cloud so that now you don't have all this physical dependency on components. is has that been the core value proposition for customers, that they want to hear that now that somebody loses a laptop and they're not toast, or they can help people work across diverse devices, or is there another big value prop that's the critical piece?
That is a major component of what Spaces is, and Spaces is the productization of the open source Selkies project, making it a fully managed service that you can consume and pay as you go. Basically, we're codifying and making the developer environment consistent, installing all the dependencies. That's like usually the worst thing. You clone some GitHub repo, and they're like, oh, I need like Node 12 or something, and like some random version of Redis. You're like, this doesn't exist on my computer. But if you run a space that has all of that pre-installed and pre-configured, you can very quickly jump into an entire complete environment, and it just works. And your enterprise admins can pre-configure these environments with everything a developer needs on day one or even hour one to start being productive immediately, because they can onboard a team that may be offshore, give them a login just from an email, and as long as they have a web browser, they can securely connect and have their entire environment ready to go.
When you think about, I remember reading sort of VC pitch deck materials and content about how to tell what one of those digital natives was, what that felt like, and one of the core indicators is that software developers are able to get in and be productive on the first day. And like I remember, reading really earlier stuff from Facebook talking about, oh, that's the critical thing, is you got to get developers able to be able to push right away. But if you start to translate into not the most bleeding edge, the brand new startups that don't have any of this legacy, don't have any dependencies, don't have any offices, don't have employees in a bunch of different places, getting to that same promise, how do I get to an environment immediately in a way that's reliable, is probably a lot harder for them to achieve. So having something like Spaces closes that gap. For what are the different kinds of customers that you're seeing adopt the product? Is it shops trying to catch up, or is it an even mix across digital natives and enterprises? What's the balance look like?
We've been seeing a lot of folks come in with interest in trying to create a secure and accessible way for their employees to be productive, either when they're in the office or remote. With Spaces, you can seamlessly close your browser on your office computer and open it up on your laptop in this exact same environment. And also the code doesn't leave the environment, so you don't have to worry about, okay, if the employee takes this IP home, where does it go from there? Right. Now it's all self-contained and streamed to your browser, so you don't have to worry about exfiltration concerns there. But folks trying to transform into a more digital, consistent environment is pretty popular. We want more enterprises want more controls over what's being installed, what versions of things are installed, and how you do that. That and just like setting up in a developer environment is so difficult. Yeah. Sometimes they don't even know, right? Like what the developers need. And so they're trying to not only gain that understanding, but make it, very seamless to enable people to be more productive.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I remember we had a whole set of new developers come into our team, and days in, very happily producing, new content, new code, making their pull requests, all this, absolutely into a now totally deprecated, set of source control that no one else had permissions to anymore. And they're kind of like, this is really a quiet place. They don't dev that much, I guess. And then we had to grab all of their work and pull it across into the new environment. There's all this tidy up, like that kind of logistics. Each one of those steps is a productivity risk, but also, of course, a security risk, an IP risk. I know in the work that we've done together with some joint customers. So great customer of ours, Newstar, super focused on making sure that we were keeping security at a very top bar. Initially in the project with us, they absolutely demanded that we run on on AWS workspaces, and it took us days and days and days of sort of working through, because they had multiple different teams inside one company. They have multiple different dev standards, dev environments, IDEs they expect, source control tools that they're using. So it wasn't just one space that they would have needed. They need multiple spaces to accommodate a business built by acquisition and M&A. So, those kinds of complexities are a place where, especially for shops like us, consultancies, it's such a huge benefit to have this self-contained, hermetically sealed little environment where that developer experience lives.
Yeah, and you can take those developer environments and move them per project. So as a consultancy company, you can have an entire space that's just for one customer, and then create a whole new one or clone that one and iterate on that. And so you can, these are lightweight environments. They're built with containers, which have a principle of being very lightweight, flexible, starting up fast, shutting down fast. So it becomes yeah, very powerful, and it's very simple to configure the environments. Folks typically don't want that burden of infrastructure.
Sure.
That's the reason why Amazon Workspaces, while it may solve part of the problem, it doesn't have that orchestration element to it where it's like, okay, and it's not developer focused, right? You can't just click and say, I have a developer, where's my IDE, launch. That's the experience we're trying to get towards with Spaces.
Yeah, there was a Warner put up a big slide at reInvent last week that said, we make primitives, not foundations, or primitives, not frameworks. Right? And I was like, I don't know. I think most of my customers want products, not primitives. They want the batteries included, right? So you would talk to me about one of the technical features for the business folks in the room. This is the time to sort of like check your coffee, make sure everything's working. We're gonna go off into the nerd corner here for a second, but storage. I've talked for a long time about how I think managing and sorting out storage as kind of a core challenge in the Kubernetes ecosystem. How did you solve storage for Spaces?
Yeah, storage is like, that's where all your data lives. It needs to be persistent. It has to work. It has to be backed up. We're leveraging a lot of the Kubernetes ecosystem to solve for storage. Kubernetes has many deep integrations, not only with Google Cloud, but with other on-prem solutions and iSCSI and I think NFS even for shared file systems. And by the principles of Kubernetes with orchestrating not only containers, the data will follow that container. So you can shut down your session on one cluster or one node in that cluster and bring it up on a completely different node, and the storage will just follow it around. For customers that may not want their data, held in Itopia Google project, we have an option for hosting the data itself in your project, and we use the Google's high-speed network to mount it over iSCSI through the network and into the container environment. So that way the data stays in your project, just the environment is run and managed by Itopia.
We've been working on some sort of increasingly exotic Kubernetes and Anthos demonstrations, and I'm challenging the dev team with, ever more complicated, storage requirements. And one of them popped up to go, why don't we just run this in a space and forget it and make Dan sort it out, right? So, I think that, no stronger recommendation than that. Help me with your, less than a year in, right? You're building fast. You've gotten a product out of market. You've taken on as a group a partnership with us at SADA. How is that working? What effects are you seeing in that partnership?
Yeah, so one of the greatest things about partnering with SADA is not only do I get to work with you again, having a great relationship there, but also, some of my former colleagues at Google are now at SADA. So we get to collaborate once again with a great team of individuals. And the alliance that we've formed, it's an extension, a natural extension of our sales team.
Yeah.
We're able to bring in expertise in a larger market that we would not normally have access to, and that you guys are already experts in. They're one of the leading Google partners. So it was a very exciting and natural fit for Itopia to reach out and partner with SADA.
Yeah, I mean, when we started to lay out, because there's 100 different ways we could go to market to try and connect with businesses that were building software as a service, and so many different options for, program constraints and incentives and what kind of structure to build. And it was, I had Itopia in the back of my head the whole time, like, if we build this program right, it's going to make it so that, so that Dan and Lee Briman and the whole crew, that they'll have a great time. So I'm super excited that we were able to get it to work and for you to sign on. So we can keep working together and, make customers happy.
Yeah, it's been really exciting and very fruitful so far. And our product's just now coming to market in a fairly aggressive
and marketplace,
way.
Right?
And we just launched on the Google Cloud Marketplace, Itopia Spaces. And yeah, so we're really looking to ramp that up and and not only get more customers, but also we're going to be growing the team
Yeah.
and finding people not only to support the product, but also the open source projects. So,
Right.
yeah.
That how has that crossover point. I mean, I think a couple of different analysts talk a lot about this. You know, commercializing open source and the sort of complexities around keeping promises in the development of open source, and any practices that you follow, or leaders that you're trying to sort of model after in building that project up.
We spent a lot of time thinking about this when we were trying to take it to market. And a lot of open source is being open and transparent about what is running under the hood. And for some people, that's good enough. Like, hey,
Sure.
you know what? This is what's powering it. I can look at the code. If there's a problem, I can kind of figure it out myself. The other part is adding value, and that value is usually in the packaging of the open source project. So Selkies is a fairly generic platform. It can do a lot of different things, from high performance video streaming, game streaming, developer environment. I mean, there's got a lot of different
Right.
things.
When we first got Selkies, it was immediately like, can we get Counter-Strike on this?
Yes.
How fast can we get Counter-Strike on this? Right. Like everybody's firing up Quake servers and going nuts with each other. So that games and one other type of media tend to drive a lot of creativity in this
Right.
phase.
Yeah, there's a lot of different options, but when it comes down to where do you focus? We decided to focus on the developer vertical right now. We may productize other aspects of the project, but it's really about how you package it all together. Put a very simple way to consume it, very simple pricing model, automate the storage stuff. Automate the creation of a cluster. Google, like what you said, cloud usually is made up of a bunch of little components and there's usually not a whole lot of very complete products, but we're wrapping that in a way that it is very easy to consume and it feels like a product that you don't have to do as much work, but you always have that open source thing backing it and the community making it better.
Mm-hmm. A lot of our developer customers, they're probably the best equipped to realize how much of what you have done is saving them real time. Right? Like they know how long it takes to set up those environments. They know what kind of management headache they're signing up for when they take on a project across borders or across multiple different customers. So I think it's a real superpower you're bringing to the community, and I appreciate the stuff that it's doing in our customers. But I'm looking forward to your broader growth. I think it's going to be great.
Yeah, thanks. It's great working with you and seeing the customers you bring to Itopia and the partnerships there.
Yeah. So one last bit, right? I mean, we're on this journey together, right? And I want to be as direct as I can. SADA is, it's on the tagline. We're not making it up, right? We're all in. Like, what else can I do to make sure that that our partnership is great? I want to make as much of a technical and marketing and sales investment as we can. Out of the stuff that the Alliance program has already provided, is there, what do you want more of? What's been most valuable? What can we do to help?
Well, yeah, in addition to, getting our product in front of your customers and doing these complex migrations from other clouds, and those are, critical opportunities to modernize someone's infrastructure and the way they work in general, move them to the future, not just an incremental change, but a major change. We're really revolutionizing the way developers work in the cloud, and another way to do that is to use Spaces. Right?
Sure.
Like Spaces is for developers, it's for DevOps folks, it's for some consulting shops, and so it's just a way to make your daily driver, your daily workspace, ultra portable and very consistent. And so the more folks we have using and giving us feedback, it's another key thing of the partnership is that we get very close and trusted feedback. Could be some of our best users. I
will give you as positive a feedback, and I think you'll know exactly where I'm coming from. Like your product actually works, and the docs are pretty great. So we're in so many alphas, so many betas, really, really early on in this large technology company's product portfolio. And let's just say when they get started with the product, you're a little further along. So we try to help with feedback, but
you've been very helpful so far, for sure.
Well, I appreciate that. It's it is a labor of love for certain, and it's a great. I think it's one of the powerful things about companies that come from an open source origin is that they're already used to this collaborative approach to development and design. It sets them up to be open to feedback and open to constructive input from customers, from partners, from everybody, as opposed to feeling like, they have this secret proprietary thing and they can't let out the secret sauce. Like you guys are helping all of us make great sauce.
Yeah, everything's already out there, and you can see it. The community can comment and contribute as much or as little as they want.
Sure.
So yeah, open source is an interesting space to be. Productizing it is a challenge.
Sure.
But we're making headways. I am the creator and prime maintainer of the project, and so there's a lot of control, and I make it. As Itopia finds things and ways to make it more extensible, we can just put that in there, and then not only do we benefit from those plugin abilities, but also the entire community does. So it's a very interesting journey for sure. Especially coming from Google, where we had a lot of different products, and most of them worked pretty well. And but I learned a lot, especially from the way developers worked at Google. And the approach that Google took to security, to zero trust, and how the code base functioned. I took a lot of those lessons learned and brought them right into Spaces. And then, of course, the dog fooding aspect that Google does constantly. I make my entire team dog food the product and use it all the time.
Perfect.
So
perfect.
we're our best user.
Oh, totally. Yeah. For a product that as a developer you can literally use 9, 10, 12, however many hours I get, I don't know how much Red Bull goes around in the office, but I'm sure there's some. And that ability to really serve your own needs first as a developer, and I think a very high performance developer, I think that sets up customers to inherit all of those little, micro optimizations and improvements, sharpen it, shaving off the rough edges that make it so that it's a great experience for them. In a way that a lot of the products, in other places, it's very difficult to dog food in that direct of a way, right? I mean, that's maybe one of the reasons why developer tools are so fantastic, is because they're made by developers.
Yeah, I totally agree. Some of the companies I really admire that focus on developers are HashiCorp,
Sure,
and even Elastic.
Yeah,
they have a very deep developer community, and they build tools for developers and by developers themselves. And so, those are some of the companies I try to model when it comes to building great tools.
Oh, this may be way off. We may end up cutting this in post, but there was a great Google Cloud blog post that came out now a couple of days ago that was talking about a pattern where sure, fine, you're using Terraform, you're writing Terraform code, but don't just execute those directly. That's nuts. Like, bury them into a Cloud Run deployer and make it deploy Terraform for you, so that you get all the telemetry, you can do rollbacks, you can stage all of it, you've got markers on all of it. Like, I thought that was a pretty fascinating model. I hadn't thought about doing it that way.
Yeah, that's the initial Selkies project always ran Terraform from Cloud Build. The entire setup is run with Cloud Build. Right now, the project only runs on GCP.
Yeah.
Uses GCP, not only Kubernetes engine, but Cloud Build to do all the deployments, and IAP to do identity.
Yeah.
So it's very baked to GCP right now. Someday we might port it to other clouds, but yeah, Terraform and Google Cloud Build are like a match made in heaven. It's like, it's great because Terraform may be a super nerdy dev tool where you run on your command line. What happens if you go on vacation?
Right.
Like, who's going to run that command line for you?
Right.
Where Cloud Build makes it possible so anyone to run that and everyone to see what happened and what broke, because it will break.
Yeah. That's given. That is a given.
Yeah.
Well, look, I really appreciate you taking a block of time with us and our audience. I think what you're building is really going to be a great product, and we're excited to be partnered with you on it. It's 2022 is going to be absolutely thermonuclear, so looking forward to working together and getting a bunch of stuff done. Thanks so much.
Thank you very much, Miles. Thanks for having me.
Cheers. Thanks, everybody.
Thank you for listening to Cloud and Clear. Check the show notes for links to this week's topics, and don't forget to connect with us on Twitter @Cloud and Clear and our website, sada.com. Be sure to rate and review the show on your favorite podcast app.